all the technical stuff, all the good sessions we do together with Microsoft Reactor. So the topic for today is go fast, improve quality, and reduce risks and costs. That's usually a contradiction. So all that stuff doesn't fit together. Let's see together today what I can show you about that. So the topics for today is we're going to do an introduction and talk about LaunchDarkly and Solidify. And then Mihai, us, we're going to talk about a little bit tech details about what LaunchDarkly is. Fredrik here is going to a little bit about what LaunchDarkly is. And then we also have a demo from Collective Bank about how they use the product. But before we start, a little bit about us. Most of us probably are, but not everyone. Here's a Swedish company or Scandinavian company founded in 2013. And the purpose of life is to help companies accelerate, secure their digitalization. And I mean, we combine our expertise with modern software development and practices and platforms, with deep technical stuff or technical skills in Azure DevOps, GitHub. And yeah, we have offices all over Scandinavia and about 60 employees at the moment. So before we get started, a little bit of what we do. So we help our customers to create value using software. So all our customers create their own software. We try to help them do it in a more nice, better way. And the methodology we have when we meet customers, that we try to start by doing an assessment to like get the feeling of what level they are and how we can help them. Then we do like different kinds of migrations. We can either move them from on-prem solutions to Azure solutions, so we can move any source control provider to Azure DevOps or GitHub. It can help them set up their automation pipelines and others. We also do cloud native development and also develop our own tools. They are mostly built Azure DevOps and GitHub. So why do we partner with LaunchDarkly? We have been using LaunchDarkly for several years, but not maybe in a professional way. We're doing it in our own product. But then we were approached by LaunchDarkly a year ago. They asked if we want a little bit more organized together. And we said yes. A good opportunity to do fun stuff together and with our customers. And by that, I want to
thank you, and thank you all for joining, both online as well as here in the room. And my name is Fredrik Olofsson, and I'm Nordics at LaunchDarkly, and I've been that for the last 3 months, so recent joiner. And LaunchDarkly is a organization that is kind of young. So moving to my slide, LaunchDarkly was founded in 2014 with the ambition to solve one of the biggest problems in software delivery: how to safely deploy software whenever you want and release. And this was the start of an amazing journey, and still is an amazing journey, where we help today more than 4,000 customers to do this. And some examples you can see here on the logos. So Atlassian, IBM, Toyota, Ryanair, etc. Organizations that use LaunchDarkly to safely load into production. And of course, also Walley, Collector Bank, that will be speaking a bit later in this session about their views on feature management. And in the Nordics, we have approximately 30 customers today, and slowly growing, fastly growing. But we definitely have the ambition to you guys in this region to efficiently with software delivery. And LaunchDarkly has been receiving a lot of recognitions along the we see a few examples here from Forrester or in the world. And more recently, LaunchDarkly was placed on Fast Company's global list of the top 10 top innovative customers in the enterprise. And this is quite a big recognition for a company that has started in 2000. Really done some really good job. And the category here is defined as the best business serving other businesses with software and cloud services. So it's basically how organizations are helping other organizations to try. So if we look at how LaunchDarkly actually help customers to improve how they deliver software, there are some interesting conclusions that you can make looking into this in more detail. And we talk about de-risking deployment software in production. We're talking about increasing developer, but also one more and perhaps even more effect of using LaunchDarkly is connecting business with enabling action. So what we're seeing on this slide is also the foundation of and why we believe in the collaboration with Solidify. So just, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but just to give a few examples. So phase 1, phase 2, heavily focused on enabling developer and development teams to work efficiently. Phase 3, phase 4, focused on actually evolving the broader organization into working together, collaborating software. And doing this together with Solidify that has the expertise and the certifications and really good helping both us and customers to do this in an efficient way possible. So that's short from my side, and I don't think we'll do questions now. Are any questions? I'll leave to.
Thank you. So today's presentation is going fast, improve quality, reduce risk and costs. My name is Mihai Bors. I'm working as a principal consultant at Solidify, and I'm usually helping customers with cloud adoption, DevOps, DevSecOps, code quality, and I usually hold workshops in these areas. And together with Bas.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to meet you, and thanks for having us at the Reactor. My name is Bas. I'm a solutions engineer at LaunchDarkly. I joined quite recently, so like 4 months ago. The team here, I'm based out of Amsterdam, but I'm covering the Benelux and the Nordics in solutions engineering. So I'm more the technical person, working closely with Frederick in the Nordic region here. So yeah, I want to start by a very brief introduction and also introducing what we'll be talking about. And Frederick already mentioned, like, what LaunchDarkly allows you to do is to separate your deploys from your releases. And I don't know if how many of you are familiar with feature toggles, feature flags? So quite a few. And how many of you are using feature toggles already today within in their software development workflow? Yeah, so you might be familiar with the concept of being able to separate your deployments from releases. And this gives a lot of opportunities for developers, but also for product managers, for example, in order to kind of define a release strategy. And in this presentation, what we will do is we will walk through the developer lifecycle, and we're going to kind of share with you, how we can help, how this workflow can help you to improve the way you build software, helping your developers to move faster, how to mitigate risk, but also how to empower product managers, for example, to collect earlier feedback once they start releasing software.
Okay, so let's take a quick look. This is obviously a simplified version of how a software delivery pipelines look like. In reality, it's more complex, but trying to include everything in it, it got really messy. So I had to scale it down a bit. To have an efficient pipeline or software delivery process, you need to make improvements in all phases of the whole process. You cannot just improve one phase because you won't get the desired output. So going fast and reducing costs does not mean that we have to or we need to take risks, or especially if we have observability, traceability, confidence, compliance in mind when we're designing our software delivery pipelines. So when looking at these pictures, what can we do to reduce costs, go fast, but still fulfill the compliance, observability, traceability benefits of a well-designed software delivery pipeline? Anyone wants to guess? Or okay, so as usually when trying to reduce costs or you want to go fast, you have to think about automation. A software delivery pipeline should automate many, if not all, the manual interventions. Manual interventions are slow, error prone, and expensive. This includes automated testing, continuous deployments, monitoring, auto security checks. It reduces risks by detecting bugs and other issues that can result in costly reworks later on. Another important feature, how we can reduce costs and improve the efficiency, is continuous feedback. As we can see from this picture, every stage of a software delivery pipeline must enable continuous feedback. Each stage should return a sort of feedback. The quicker the quicker we get the feedback, the easier it is to resolve that issue, to address that issue before it gets into a real problem later on. So continuous feedback prevents costly errors and delays. Also, we need to shift left as much as possible in the software delivery pipeline. So we don't have to wait for security for testing it in a managed environment. We can shift it left as much as we can. Maybe even in the planning phase, we can start thinking about security. And automated through each of the phases. Feature flags is also a way that allows us to shorten the feedback loop.
I think one interesting thing is that when you release, you often think about I'm releasing to my audience, right, to my end users. But with feature flags, that is not necessarily the case, right? You can start very early on by deploying things into an environment, even production, and then you can target just internal users. So you can do a team ship, for example. So expose a feature to the team so they can start like working, making some improvements based on actually using it or going through the new feature. And then you can expand that usage. Like, if you build a product that, your developers also use or other people in the organization also use, they're great for dog fooding, right? So you can just target them and involve them and start collecting very early feedback on the features you're working with, even before you start exposing a feature to a certain audience of end users.
Another way to improve the costs and reduce risk is to improve software quality, code quality. There are tools that we can use, like code quality systems, to get feedback on our code, reduce the technical debt. They help us prioritize the technical debt, and then we can detect these bugs, issues before they even get the problem in production. A clean code it's a much easier code, right, to maintain and to add new features. Another important way to reduce costs is resource optimization. For example, by having automated process for provisioning infrastructure, we can always remove resources, add them on demand. We should obviously continuously scale up and down our application to meet our traffic peaks. Another way to reduce costs is looking at this picture. We see free environments. Most of the customers that I've worked with until now usually have a dev environment, which is a bit unstable, or where they usually have continuous delivery. Then they have a more stable environment for acceptance testing or staging, and they have a production. Do you need all these free environments? Then logging is among the most expensive parts of a system. Anyone disagrees? So what we could use like feature flagging to dynamically flip verbosity of the logging based on the need, and then we'll ship less logs to the application performance management system. And another key among the most important feature that can help us to be more effective is to increase team collaboration. There are studies at Stanford that are showing that even the perception of being part of a team increases an individual's performance. And
yeah, there's one final part that we want to mention in this context, and that is, I think, when you build software, you're going through a workflow, you go through it again and again. And I think it's more and more organizations, they realize that, metrics could really help, and I think most of you will be familiar with the DORA metrics. They became like an industry standard on, software delivery performance. And more organizations are looking into kind of capturing these metrics over time in order to be able to kind of measure, how are we performing as teams building software. At LaunchDarkly, we also realized this, and we started working on a product that we call Accelerate in order to provide the ability to kind of capture DORA metrics in the context, but we're also focusing on providing other insights that are more related to the flag usage within your organization. And so this way, you can kind of do more informed decisions around how can you improve the software development lifecycle within your organization.
Okay, so now we will try to go through each phases and see what we can add. We will just scratch because on each phase we could spend days to go through what we can improve and not improve. So let's start with the first phase, planning. So planning is among one of the most important parts of the software delivery process. It's the first stage, first phase. Usually what you put in, I mean, if you don't put anything good in it, you can't expect something good at the end, right? What you put in is what you get at the end. So planning has to be done properly. Requirements have to be clear, precise. Teams should understand, shouldn't be written by any other teams. They should describe the need of the business or the end users. Good. So let's go through some of the features that kind of predict the organization performance, right? And the first one that I found is working in small batches. And why this is important is because it shortens the feedback loop. So we should decompose into smaller features instead of working on a long feature branch. We can split a complex feature into much smaller ones for rapid development, and then we can deliver them, get feedback, adapt, and continue. This will result in faster feedback and more satisfaction. Kanban boards usually increase visibility, can help to reduce risks, delays, and also identifies areas where we can streamline or we can optimize work, right? They kind of eliminate waste. Kanban boards can be used also to get measure some metrics like throughput, lead time. That is why they have to give a correct overview of the work in progress. If someone looks at the Kanban board, they should understand which work is in progress, who's doing what, and which feature requirements are in production or in whatever environment you have. Let's go. I just managed to jump. Team experimentation is another important factor that predicts the performance of an organization. Team experimentation is the ability of a team to change the requirements during the development process, to update them based on their observations that they got or feedback they got in their software delivery pipelines. A team that is allowed to experiment, they can detect roadblocks, issues that can become later problems that need a lot of rework. Some examples of experimentation is where teams can test different variants of a UI, test different algorithms in the backend, or they want to see the performance impacts of a change in the backend.
Yeah, I think there's one thing that I want to add here related to working with feature flags, and that is if you separate deploys from releases, then your product managers can be more autonomous. They can take more ownership of the release process. And so the planning phase is also a good start of like thinking about, for this particular feature, how am I going to release this? So what is my release strategy here? For example, if a feature has a potential performance impact on your production infrastructure, you might choose for like doing a percentage-based rollout or canary rollouts. Maybe it's a feature that has been requested by a lot of your customers, and you know your customers, so you want to involve them. So you want to collect early feedback by running a beta program with a certain group of your customers, for example, in order to make small improvements before you make a feature general available. Or if you do not really know your customers, but you're still curious, to see like what are we shipping here? Is this really, what our customers need? Then you can also make data-driven decisions. With LaunchDarkly, you can use experimentation. So you can tie experiments to your feature flags and then start collecting. So do things like, for example, A/B testing with the product.
And as mentioned in the previous slide, shifting left security is important. And even in this phase, we can start thinking about security in form of abuser story. For example, as a authenticated customers, I see how my account URL looks like, and I'm trying to guess and see if I can see someone else's account. This is an example of an abuser story. Okay, let's move on to the next phase, the code phase or the CI. So CI is not about the tools that we are using. It's about how we think. CI means that we need to merge often into the same branch. It reduces this integration nightmare. It also, all the developers will know where the code is heading to, right? Everyone has the same view of the code. Only one version of the code is important, the current one. So for example, if boss is doing some refactoring and I'm implementing a feature, if we want to merge often, then I'm not sure how he's doing the refactoring and my feature. I'm implementing the feature in the wrong structure or in the wrong way. But CI, I mean, as good as it gets, that you have the same truth of the code, comes with some challenges. And some challenges that we need to merge often, at least once a day. And sometimes we need to work with partially completed feature. We can't wait until we completely done a feature. We need to be able to merge it in partially completed. And then we need to deal with releasing code having partially completed features.
Maybe using feature flags.
Yes.
Wrap it in feature flags. Yeah, I think one area where a lot of our customers are making huge improvements in developer efficiency is being able to reduce the number of long living branches for a repository. Because the thing is, if you have multiple long living branches to maintain, you end up, spending time in kind of syncing those branches, to cherry picking of changes between different branches. And so a lot of our customers moving towards like trunk-based development, where they have very short-lived feature branches, and they check in frequently, and they just make sure they wrap all the features in feature flags so they can safely merge things into the main branch without impacting any environment. The final thing I want to note here is a final part here is that with LaunchDarkly, you can also use code references. So if you use feature flags, then I mean, a question that a lot of our customers are asking is like, yeah, feature flags, great idea, but I mean, it will only introduce more technical depth, and we're already struggling with that. But using code references, you can set up a small automated task that in LaunchDarkly, and I'll show you during the demo, that will provide you with insights as a developer. It's like, okay, for this particular feature flag, it's ready to be archived. We no longer use it. Where does it live inside my source code? And you can look it up. You can just straight link from LaunchDarkly into your source code and start removing feature flags.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but this session is interactive, so feel free to ask questions. So the next parts with working with code, we mentioned in the very beginning that automation is key, and we need also to find a balance. How much we want to put in the CI part, how much we want to automate in the CI part. We said that you have to shift left as much as possible, but also you need to be able to merge quick code. You don't want to have long 2 hours checks before you can merge your code into the trunk, right? So you need to find a sort of balance between automation there, right? You need to have different levels of testing, for example. For example, you could run in a pull request only the unit testing, behavioral tests, integration tests, and so on. And then in later phases, run some other types of tests that take much longer time. Also, security checks needs to be already in here. We don't want to merge into the trunk should be always releasable. We don't want to merge in code that is not secure. So those has to be detected as soon as possible. And even code quality system should be run in here to get feedback on potential bugs and issues. Primarily, there should be the development teams that write tests, right? They have the most context. And the same goes for security checks. They know more how the software is built, and they should know more how to set up checks. Culture, as mentioned in the very beginning, it's key. So encouraging collaboration and breaking down silos between teams, it's very important, and it can be achieved by using an inner source culture, which means bringing open source practices into our organizations. This simplifies collaboration across teams, increase code reuse, right? There's no need to reinvent the wheel for each team. And also developer satisfaction, since they learn from each other, they will boost their developer skills.
Yeah, I mean, I promised Mihai that I will not go down the rabbit hole of talking about, what to test with feature flags, because that is sometimes a challenging topic. So I will not go into that one. But it is important, that features are wrapped in flags. The code is wrapped in feature flags, and I'll just stick to that one for this slide for now. But we do provide in our docs, we provide guides, for example, in helping you kind of what to test with feature flags, because the potential variations can be unlimited, right? So it's hard to kind of find a strategy in order what to test in this phase around feature flags.
So a good practice. It started in.
There's a question, I think. You want me to go down that rabbit hole?
Switch flags, I mean,
Yeah.
for testing.
You mean the impact of like different flag variations when testing,
Maybe
or?
some cases how I can use feature flags in automated tests. So yeah, the first thing that came to my head it is hide bugs.
Okay, yeah.
With
Well,
feature flags.
ideally not for hiding bugs. I mean, hiding uncompleted features, yes,
Yes.
but typically, I mean, ideally, of course, either your continuous integration process or code review will help you to kind of remove as many bugs as possible. There's no software without bugs, right? That is doesn't exist. So I think what's more important, if you use feature flags, then different variations that you serve for a flag can have different impacts on how the software is experienced, right? So and so that is, I think, the most challenging subject around feature flags is like what to test, because there's so many different variations that you can have, and so it's kind of I'll just mention one thing and then we move on. But so one thing, for example, is like making sure that you focus on like, and then maybe pairing also with the product manager, like what is our release strategy here? So what will be the different flag variations that we will serve? What are the targeting rules that we will use with feature flags? And I'll show you targeting rules when I do the demo. And based on that, like focus on this is what I need to test, because this is the release strategy for this particular feature. So that means that the feature flags will go through different stages of like reaching certain audiences, for example, and those conditions you want to focus on when testing. But yeah, I mean, yes, you can hide anything behind the feature flag, so you can also hide bad code behind the feature flag. But ideally, then also test the variations, that go that in order to make sure that there is no kind of bad code hidden behind the flag, but there's tested code hidden behind the flag.
Yeah, and also I have a question regarding low level, I mean implementation. You will explain how the feature LaunchDarkly works in the code.
Yeah,
Will you
I
explain
will.
it?
Yeah, I will show that during the demo.
Yeah,
We will
okay.
go through some examples for
Yeah,
sure.
thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
But a good practice for features that don't have a complex release strategy is to test with the flag on and off. You need to make sure that the code works in the same way as it worked before with the flag off, and then you need to write your new tests to test the new workflow or the new code. So let's take a quick look at the build as well. What can we do in the build phase? So basically here we need to run all the checks that we already run. I mean, running some checks in the pull request, it's good, but you're not testing the final artifact, right? In the build phase, you have the final artifact that you will then use binary promotion, meaning that you build once and deliver several times. So it's important that to run more or less all the tests that you run before and some extra maybe. Versioning artifacts, it's also very important. Allows to keep track of the changes, makes the release management much easier, and even the maintenance of and support of the software. Any questions? And then let's go through the deliver phase. So how many in this room or even online are stressed when they release new software to production? Hands up. Okay. How many deploys outside working hours? Okay. So well, that's the first. It's an indicator that there's room for improvement, right? So continuous delivery is not possible without zero downtime deployments, and here we could use different depending on the infrastructure you are on. You can achieve it with different strategies, right? After we deploy to an environment, hopefully as early as possible, we need to run some end-to-end tests, right? To make sure that everything works as it should, and real end-to-end tests, right? Setting up different workloads from zero to the end, like setting up accounts, sending transactions, or whatever the business needs, right? Here we also need to run some security testing, like dynamic testing, with tools like ZAP, for example. And for production environment, we need to run some smoke tests so that we know that everything works as it should. Otherwise, we should roll back. Performance testing is also something that you can think about. If you don't have a good strategy for performance testing or tools in place, then you can use feature flags to progressively deliver a feature and to a customer group, right? And see the impact on the infrastructure. And if there's no much impact, then you can release for severals. Yes.
Yeah, I think one interesting to note is like recently I came across a customer that they do percentage rollouts all the time, but they do it really fast. So they want to move really fast. And very often when you think about percentage rollouts, you start by, oh, we do like 10% every day or something. And it takes like almost 10 days in order to reach all your audience. Of course, if something goes bad, then you will just use a kill switch in order to turn off the feature. But some customers also use like a percentage-based rollouts and move really fast, like literally a few minutes. So they just increase like every few minutes, but just monitor the impact of a feature on their production environment and just go like within, like say half an hour at the most, from like a small percentage of users in order to 100%. So there's a lot of different strategies that you can follow in order to release software to your audience and to make sure that you mitigate any risk of your feature having a negative impact to your production environments.
I think I managed to jump over a slide by mistake. I'll move back a bit. Sorry for that.
Do we have time? Is anyone managing time for
I
us?
think,
Or
do we have time to go back? Okay, let's skip that then for now.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Okay, operate and monitor. This is still in the manage phase. How do we, after we deliver the software to the new environments, how do we operate, right? It's a good practice to do an inventory of all of our workloads, understand their criticality, and based on the business criticality, we should define a baseline, which is the tools that we need to use to be able to manage or to operate this the workloads, right? And here we can talk about tools like policies, automation, for example, if you're using Azure, and so on.
yeah, I think from an operational point of view, I just want to mention one thing in this context, and that is when we think about feature flags, we most of the time we think about they are temporarily, right? They're ephemeral. Once a feature is general available to all our users, we can just archive the flag and we can clean up our code. But there's also this notion of like having permanent flags. Like for example, if you want to have the ability of being able to toggle like more verbose logging in a production environment, for example, you can do it. You can just toggle the flag, you get more verbose logging. You can do some root cause analysis. Once you're done, you just toggle back. Another thing is like what we call like circuit breakers that are almost like a kill switch, but they just reside in your source code. So let's say you have some non-critical features and you're running into availability issues with your product. And so you still want to, retain a good user experience, but you do not want to shut off any kind of, critical features. So then you could use that in order to turn off a few features that have some impact on your environment, so that make a difference in being able to continuously deliver a good service. But until you maybe, I don't know, made some improvements to your production infrastructure, you turn them off. Let's say, I don't know, a chat box for support. People can find other ways of reaching out to your support team using WhatsApp or an email or whatever. So turn that off for the time being. Fix your issues. Make sure this your product becomes performant again, and then turn them on. So that's just an example of how you can also use kind of permanent flags in your application code. Yeah, I think just to summarize, I think using feature flags can really help you to, kind of move faster as a developer, because you can continuously kind of merge changes into the main branch, for example, hiding behind feature flags. I think it also really kind of helps you to build more confidence in the product that you're building. Because there's so many ways of kind of collecting early feedback, either working with internal teams or working with your customers, either working directly with customers, involving them, or doing more data-driven decisions using experimentation related to feature flags. And I think the other thing is, and that is something that really surprises me, is when I talk to customers, sometimes they do not realize that product managers can be they are a great, developers, let me put it this way, can move some of their responsibilities over to the product managers, give them more ownership over the release, because very often a product manager is kind of like the owner of, the quality of the feature that you ship to your customers. And so feature flags help you also to kind of separate those deploys from releases, and just put the product manager in the driver's seat to release software to the audiences. Thanks. Any other questions before I jump in a short product demo? Yeah, please.
If feature is connected with different type of object,
Yeah.
and a lot of data accumulated for the feature, you turn this off. Will LaunchDarkly have some mechanics to manage these different data states?
Yeah, I think that is a great question, and I think it's one of the hardest things, right? It's like whenever you build new features, if you heavily rely on data, there will be schema updates, schema changes that you're making. If you release something, then your customers start using that feature, so data will go into the production databases. And so it's we talk about the kill switch all the time, as it's like this easy thing that can help you with any problem that you have. Just turn it off, but and do a rollback. But then there's no way of doing a rollback, right? You cannot easily go. And I think that is definitely an area where we do not have feature management on schema updates, which would be really great if that was possible. Maybe if you use like some object relational mapping tools, that could really help here. So it depends a little bit to what extent code is influencing. But still, okay, so maybe you conclude from there that you always need to do kind of a roll forward, right? Whenever you have issues, because you have already like these updates in your databases. But even then, a kill switch can really help, of course, to turn off a feature for a while. And you will not do a rollback, but at least your product is still stable and performing for your customers. And then you might, as a result, have to do kind of a redeployment in order to, to kind of deploy the updates your developers are making. But in the meantime, at least your customers are not negatively impacted. And then you kind of roll forward with the new feature, turn the flag on again, and then you can continue your work. So I think it is definitely a kind of a difficult area, but I think feature management can still play a huge role in kind of making sure your customers have a good experience.
Another option is to do, for example, the schema changes in 2 iterations, for example. You turn on the feature, you still keep the old structure, right? And when if you have any issues, you can just flip it back to the old schema. And then in the next iteration, you can, after you activate the feature and you're cleaning the flag, you can clean the schema as well. So you have to do it in 2 steps.
Yeah, and in that context, there is also kind of a lot of kind of migration related control you can do with feature flags. Think about configurations, having different configuration versions that live alongside each other. So that could also be, we do have quite some customers that, for example, when they move from on-premise to cloud, that use LaunchDarkly or feature management a lot for kind of helping them in order to do a smooth migration between environments. Yeah, I think one thing is, Frederick, how much time do I have? Like 10 minutes maybe, or? Yeah, what does that mean? Okay, so I can spend like 10 minutes on the demo. Okay, great. Perfect. Let me just quickly rejoin because I was kicked out of the Teams meeting and people cannot follow along. And then I need this one to connect. So you folks can see something, but in order for you to be able to, so whose machine is this? Are you sharing?
Yes, but just share. Should be fine. Good.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I'll spend, so we do not have, I'm not sharing? Really? I am, I think, or not.
Open team.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I did press this one. Am I now? Yeah, okay, sorry, yeah, perfect, good. Yeah, so I'll just spend, 10 minutes is short for doing a product demo, right? So if you have any interest after this meeting for a more extensive product demo, I'm happy to do that, or happy to work with you, understand better, what needs you have around potentially using feature management, potentially using LaunchDarkly as a product. So on the left-hand side, we have the LaunchDarkly. We're looking at the feature flags dashboard here. And on the right-hand side, I just have a very basic React application that is just listing staff picks, so books. So we have already deployed a new feature, amazing feature, in order to provide rating stars for our end users so they can see how other people value a title and hopefully boosting our sales. And so that's already deployed, but no one is seeing that feature. So it's hidden behind the feature flag. There's no audience that is currently able to experience the rating features. And so in order to expose it, the one thing I can do in LaunchDarkly is I can toggle the flag, right? My code is wrapped behind the flag. And so I can instantly kind of enable the book rating, and we should see it on both, by the way, but I'm not sure why that is not syncing. Maybe I still have a rules on there. But so this allows us to quickly kind of, toggle a feature, because I can also instantly kind of disabling it. And this is kind of what you could say like the most basic usage of feature management is like simply using what we call like a kill switch, kind of enabling a certain feature for all your audience or disabling a certain feature. Now, where it becomes more interesting, and I think I still have an example open here. Let me just check the banner. So when I enable the banner here, so we can see here on the top side, I have like someone who is like a premium customer. So it's a customer that is on our premium plan. So I'm using entitlements here in order to show a banner specific to a certain audience of customers using an attribute for that customer. So there's like this user has like a context, you could say, and within that context, that user is marked as a premium customer, and premium customers always get free shipping. And using this campaign banner, we just want to inform them that they always get free shipping as premium customers, hoping for them to decide a bit more faster on buying some additional titles. And I can use a context. And in LaunchDarkly, very often when you think about a context, you might think about, okay, if you have a user-centered application, it's just a user context. Like here, I have a user that is signed in. The user has certain attributes, and I can use these attributes in order to target that audience, like, for example, this premium user. But a context can be anything. I mean, it could also be, we have customers in automotive, for example. And so they have car entertainment systems, and they build updates for those car entertainment systems. And what they do is they roll out updates country by country using LaunchDarkly. And here the context is not an individual. Yeah, there's an owner of the car, but it's the car that is the context here. So a context can be anything. Or take flights as an example. If you're an airline, you might want to target on specific flights. Maybe some flights, they're not fully booked, so you want to do some additional promotion. Then you could target specific flights, and people can see when they try, we look up certain flights, they can see some kind of promotion banner related to that particular flight in order to drive more conversion. So the context can be anything, not necessarily a user, like in this example. And I can use the context when I do targeting. So if I go into the book rating feature, for example, then I can turn it on, but I can say, for example, I only want to expose it to a certain individual user. That could easily be like an internal staff ship, right? I can say for my, for a specific team, and you can also store that team as what we call like a segment in LaunchDarkly. And so you can reuse that team. So if I want to ship it to the internal team, to a QA team, for example, I can do individual targeting. But it becomes more interesting, I think, when you use that context. So for example, when I'm saying like, let's do a staff ship. So the bottom user is a staff user. So when the account is staff, and when that has a value of true, then I want to show the book rating. In all other cases, I just want to hide the book rating. And then when I save this change here, then we should see, I don't know why the bottom one is not showing up here. Just try to, maybe I need to sign in. See if we can get this user into becoming like a staff user. So now we can see it. So it was not refreshed it anyway. But so now we have a staff user at the bottom, and the staff user sees the rating feature. So this is like an internal ship before we start shipping it to an audience. The other thing I can always do is I can always decide to do a percentage rollout. So it's built into the the targeting view in LaunchDarkly. So you can always decide, okay, let's start by just rolling this out to a small percentage of our users. If you have a lot of users, it could be a really small percentage, could be less than one. And the drawback of using the kind of percentage rollout this way is whenever you want to increase the percentage, you need to go back to the targeting and then increase that percentage there. And so in order to resolve that, we provide workflows. And workflows are a really great tool in order to automate your release process. They can become pretty complex. Let's look at a simple example. So let's pick the book rating. So in this case, we can set a date. So at a certain date and time, we start rolling out the book rating feature with 10% increments on a daily basis. And when I just review this workflow, you can see it builds a workflow for me. Can you? Yeah. And so I can make changes here. So I can adjust this workflow. I can also store it, save it as a template to make it reusable. And so this way, for any type of release strategy that I might have within my organization, I could build a workflow template. And so whenever I want to follow that particular release strategy, I can just use that template. So I can just start that workflow, and it starts, executing automatically that release strategy. If something goes bad, you can always turn it off. Of course, you can always use the kill switch if a feature. So let's say you do a kind of rollout as something is not as expected, you can always use the kill switch. So this way you can really automate your release process in LaunchDarkly. And we do provide built-in templates that you can use. You can also just build your own, like doing a regional rollout, for example, country by country, or just anything you can imagine on how rolling out your features. So I have a little time left. There's one thing that maybe I want to really quickly show you. So we only scratched the surface of LaunchDarkly, but as I think there's quite a few people here that are like technical, like developers. So one other thing that is really important is managing technical debt, right? So within LaunchDarkly, we provide statuses. And so this is a life cycle, you could say, an automated life cycle in LaunchDarkly. So with 4 simple statuses, new is a new feature that hasn't been used yet. An active feature flag is a feature flag that serves different variations to your audience. A launched one is a feature flag that has been serving the same variation over the last 7 days. And so that is a potential flag for cleanup. And then a inactive flag is a flag that hasn't been called by your code. And so that is also a potential candidate for cleanup. We have a nice also kind of menu here. If I go to archive flag, it also summarizes the status for your flags. And so this can help you to mitigate the technical debt in your application. And lastly, when I go to a certain feature flag and I go to code references, you can also see where in my source code. So where in source code are these flags used? You can see them across different file types. You can see there's a TypeScript file here that is using the flag, but there's also a Terraform module. So I'm using Terraform here to provision the project, this demo project. And so this flag is also defined in this particular Terraform module. And this helps you as a developer in order to mitigate, to make sure that you do not increase the technical debt in your applications. Now, there's one final thing that really quickly, because another question I think that came across was, how do you use it in source code? So I'll very quickly show you just a Java example. There is a big difference, by the way, between server-side connections and so SDKs that we provide and client-side. But I'll just use a server-side example here. So you bring in the SDK into your application code, and we support close to a 40 programming ecosystem. So most programming languages that I use today are all supported with SDKs that are dedicated to the language. But they're also pretty consistent in how they're designed. So as a developer, we're used to using different programming languages. So they're all like pretty consistent in. So if you know how to connect for one language, you will know for others. The key is when you initialize the SDK, so when you connect your application to LaunchDarkly's Flag Delivery Network, you just use a key, and the key you can retrieve from your project doing Command K, and you go copy key for the environment. And what is really important, a key is always connected to a single environment. So in this case, it's connected to the development environment if I would copy that key and use it in my application. And so this is how you can have different targeting rules across different environments with LaunchDarkly. So being like test staging and production if you have those environments. And then once the SDK initializes, it will fetch the flag rule set. It will open a streaming connection. So we are not a polling solution. We have a streaming connection. Whenever you make flag changes, they're pushed out almost real time within 200 milliseconds to your application. So the experience for your end user will be that we have real time updates. And then lastly, when you start evaluating flags, you provide a context. And the context in this example is this profile, for example. So you provide a context, and that is like a function call, right? So whenever I want to fetch a flag variation from LaunchDarkly, it might depend on the rules that I've set in LaunchDarkly, what variation I get. And so in order to match against the rules, I provide it with a context, like, I provide it with parameters to a function call, you could say, and based on my parameters, I get a result for the flag variation from the flag rule set. With server side, the flag rules just execute on the server, no need to connect to the network. And so this is just to give you a very quick kind of look into how you can implement LaunchDarkly. Do we have time for one small question, or I have someone here that's saying your time's up?
Yeah, thank you. So, for example, I have some feature with algorithms with 10 different algorithms, and I can set 10 users. The rules for first user will be with first algorithm and so on, and all these users will be on K cluster, and I can just run automated test and test it in the same time in parallel, right? So I just can connect this flag to each user.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you set up your targeting rules, right? So if
Yeah,
if you target specific individual users, that is something that you can do. Yeah.
yeah. So it's a question. So I
Yeah.
can test algorithms in parallel like this.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that if I think the way I would do that, I think, is build a little bit of automation using APIs, because you will have a lot of different kind of targeting rules. So I think in
It's just
sequence you want to
example, yeah.
test different variations. So it's something that you can perfectly do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe we can, after the presentations, if you still have some time, you have more questions, feel free to just ask. Yeah, so I'll just leave it here. Again, if there's any interest, I'm happy to spend more time with you folks running through a demo. But for now, I think we have to go to our next guest for tonight. I think am I good here? Can I just switch off and you switch on again? Mihai?
You could use yours as well.
Then we move on to Adam.
So unfortunately, Adam could not be here with us. He will join us remote.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me in Stockholm?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. So you just tell me when you've set up the screen sharing, Mihai.
I'm working on it. Let's see if I can choose
Perfect.
full screen. We're good to go.
All right. Awesome. So I am going to talk to you about why we use feature management at Walley. Walley is a brand of Collector Bank. And I am going to start by talking a little bit about Walley. So Walley is a payments solution in the sense that we help merchants perform payments online, in store, and in applications. We are active in Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, Danish markets, as well as some German and Austrian merchants. Here's a couple of our merchants that you can see. A lot of you probably have used our service. The latest one in our arsenal is Meds that we got. They used to have Klarna as a payment provider, but switched over to us recently. A little bit about me. My name is Adam Lith. I've been working at and with Walley and Collector Bank for over 10 years. I am currently working as a consultant in Walley's core team, and I am self-employed at my own consultancy firm. If any of you want to contact me, here's my contact information. It will be in the end slide as well. Let's get starting. So I'm going to talk to you about why we started with feature management. And so we're going to have to talk about a little history. Up until 2015, we only had one development team at Walley. That team built a monolithic application using Scrum. And we only had releases about 1 or 2 times each month. And in 2016, I was given the assignment of architect. And you might say, like, well, why would you need an architect for only one team? Well, the challenge that we were facing was that we were going to go up to 4 teams. We were going to break up this monolithic application. And each of the three new teams, we're going to take some of the functionality from the monolith and create a separate service for it. The old team, which is the core team, we're going to do some extractions of services as well, but they were going to be the main people in charge of the old monolith going forward. All the teams decided that they wanted to switch over to Kanban to have a more fluid feature management. And we also said that we wanted to have a release cycle or deploy cycle of 2 to 3 times per week. And it's no surprise, since I'm here talking today, that we started using feature management. And you might wonder, like, why did we choose LaunchDarkly? And by the way, this is what their old logo used to look like when we did the switch. But we had a couple of deal breakers that we needed from the service provider that we're going to have the feature flags. The first one was that we didn't want any kind of self-hosting. There were a couple of products on the market, but they all required that you hosted their applications on your own server. And we didn't want that. We wanted the thing as a service. The second thing that we wanted was that we wanted a separation between a team and an application. So even though each application, each service that we have is owned by a team, that doesn't mean that it is the only team developing in that repository. And so, for example, if we take the monolith, the core team owns it, but we have several teams building features in it and having their own feature flags. So the feature flag is owned by a team, even though the application might be owned by a different team. And we wanted that to be easily managed within the provider of feature flags. Lastly, we wanted the developer environments to function in the same way as the shared environments. So what I mean by that is that if I, as a developer, wanted to turn on a feature for my local environment, I should go into the same interface as I do when I turn on a feature in a test environment or in production. So I just go into my environment and turn on the flag there. These requirements at the time, this was 2016, it's quite a lot of years ago, only 2 providers stood out. It was LaunchDarkly, and I believe the other one was Split. And the reason we choose LaunchDarkly was that we tried it out, and it's pretty much just worked. So it was a very nice start. We had some issues in the beginning, but that was because of problems we created, not with LaunchDarkly. So now to the most interesting part, like, how are we using it today and what effects are we seeing? So first off, it has been a major change in the development style. My team, we have like 2 rules that has happened because of feature flagging. The first rule is that every change that we make, if possible, it's 99.9% possible, but almost every change should be able to be deployed in an inactive state. So this is usually done by feature flagging. In most cases, it is feature flagging. Sometimes it is not. Sometimes it is, oh, we have a new API endpoint and no one has permission to use it yet. Or some other mechanism. But the code needs to be able to be deployed in an inactive state. The other rule that we have is that, and this is more of a guideline, but any developer or every developer should push their code to master using a pull request at least once a day. And we do this because of several reasons. The main effect is that it makes the pull requests smaller. We're going to have a lot more of them, but they're going to be smaller. And having a smaller pull request makes it easier to see that you have made the feature deployable in an inactive state. You can see easier that the feature flagging is done correctly. You can easier see if there are any bugs, and you can easier see if there are any missing test cases. Because that is another rule that we have, that in a pull request, you have the implementation, you show that the feature flagging is done correctly, and you have tests for the code that you push. That doesn't mean that the feature is complete. On the contrary, usually most pull requests are not a complete feature. They're a partial feature, and that's okay. The second change is in our feature lifecycle, and that's most easiest to just show you. So these are the different phases that our features go through, and this is completely separate from the deployments. The deployments happens all the time, but each feature goes through this flow. And after we have released it in production, one new thing that we started doing is that we have started measuring the outcome of the feature. This is usually done 1 or 2 weeks after the feature has been released. And we just measure to see if we got the outcome that we expected when we planned the feature. And then after we are satisfied with the outcome measurement, we have a stage of cleaning. And here we go through the code base and remove all traces of the feature flag. And this is to ensure that we do not have any feature clutter, that we are not having a bunch of feature flags living too long, or having the developers have to handle too many feature flags at once in the code base. But it has a significant impact on our definition of when is a feature done. A feature for us is not done until it is until the feature flags are removed from the code. Another thing that we use feature management for today is incremental rollouts. A lot of our teams build stuff and then want to try it out on maybe a specific merchant. We have a couple of merchants that we have a better what's the word in English? We have a tighter connection with, and we might release a few features to those, test them out and see if it works out, and then release it to more and more merchants. And also, and this is going to be a little bit more of a story, we had in our core team the assignment of extracting a very fundamental, a very crucial part of the monolith. And this part had some specific requirements. It had very high availability requirements and very high load requirements. We're going to extract this as a microservice, and we're going to also use a couple of dependencies to other teams' services. And we had this nagging gut feeling that we might do everything correctly with using feature flags when developing and doing the rollout. But what if something goes wrong? What if the other team, which has not at all the same experience as our team when it comes to hosting a system with high availability and high load requirements, what do we do if their service that we have as a dependency, a required dependency, if they can't live up to those requirements? So we implemented kill switches. For us, it was kill switches based on regions. So we wanted to be able to maybe cut off all traffic for Sweden in this new for this new microservice and go back to the old flow. And as time went by, those dependencies were hardened. They became better and better at keeping their availability up. And we are now at the end of the road with these kill switches and are planning to remove them soon. But they have been, during this phase, which has been maybe a 2-year phase, they have been crucial to not losing total availability of the system. And I can see that my time is up. So I'm guessing that we're going to move over to questions.
Any questions?
Can you hear me? Hello? Yeah. I'm wondering what kind of tooling are you using to integrate everything, to consolidate the information, make it visible with all the work, and like, are you using Azure DevOps?
Oh yeah, okay. So most of our teams are using Azure DevOps. Some we have that each team are allowed to choose themselves what they're using. So some are using Azure DevOps some completely, both for both for the Kanban boards and the backlogs, but also for the pipelines and code hosting. Some teams are hosting their codes in Bitbucket. Some are doing their backlogs and Kanban boards in Jira. So it differs from team to team. We don't really have any specific integration between our tooling and LaunchDarkly because we haven't really felt the need for it. LaunchDarkly's interface has worked fine out of the box to work with.
Any other questions? We had the 2 questions before. How do you roll out schema changes? Or how do you flag those? How do you work with database migrations?
All right, so it is a tricky question. What we do is that since we are deploying all the time and we are performing our schema changes in our databases at point of deployment, that means that whichever schema we are changing to, it needs to be backwards compatible because the new code will not be running when the new schema is deployed. So whenever you want to do something that is breaking for the schema, then you have to divide it in several steps. Pretty much like Mihai said before, that you need to do it in several parts. But the main thing is that if I say that I have made a backwards compatible schema, or forwards compatible, as it's going to be in this case, the schema is going to support the old code and the new code when the feature is turned on. So I turn on the feature, I get all these new nice data points filled up in the schema, and I suddenly realize I need to turn the feature off. So for these features that we have a feeling that we're going to need to turn it off, because you don't always have that. But when we feel that this will need to be able to be turned off, then we make sure that we still fill in the data in the schema so that when we turn it off, it's still going to work. The next problem is going to be when you turn on the feature again, because then you're going to have a mix of old and new, but you're going to have that anyway. Whenever you turn on a feature, you're going to have data that's in the old style and in the new style at the same time. And what we usually do is that we migrate the data as part of the release of the feature. So we usually have 2 feature flags in these cases. So let's say that we have a feature flag that makes all the data written to the new schema as well as the old schema. And then when that is on, then we can start migrating the old data. And once the migration is done, then we can turn on a second feature flag that is, now we're going to read according to the new schema. And if the feature, when we read the schema from the new schema, that's when the feature is completely on. And if it fails, then we can turn off only the read flag. And data is still going to be written according to both schemas, but we can still fall back on the old behavior. So that was quite a long explanation, but I think that would work.
Thank you very much. Any other questions in the room? Yes, no? Yes?
All right.
As we have a little bit more time, Adam, do you unit test feature flag variations, and can you elaborate a little bit on how you do that?
Of course, yes, yes, we do that sometimes. It all depends on how sure am I that I have feature flagged correctly? Because that is when you test for the feature flag being turned off, that is to be sure that the old behavior is not tampered with, right? So what we do is that if we have let's say a unit test suite, and we have a couple of tests that we know that these tests, we need to make sure that we are doing the feature flag correctly. Before we do the new implementation, we do a copy of those tests, usually like suffix them with old or off or something like that. And then we, in those unit tests, manually turn the feature off. And then when we start developing the feature, and then we modify the original unit test, then we can test the new behavior, but we'll always have that other file, the other test file with the old flag with the flag off. So that's a pretty easy way of testing both ways. And then when we clean up the feature, then we remove that old off test. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, now I have question regarding unit test, and I don't understand what is the difference for unit testing approach if we have feature flags. I mean, we always should. It's like having Boolean flag inside method. So we always still have the same approach for unit testing for coverage. What's the difference if we have feature flags or not?
Well, as I said, this is we do this extra step of testing the old flow only when we are unsure if we have feature flagged correctly. This is maybe just in 5% of cases. I'm just throwing that out, but it's very seldom. So most of our test coverage is only for when the feature flags are turned on. And it's in specific cases that we test with the flag off. So that, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam, for your presentation. Really good, really nice
Thank
and
you.
interesting. So let's move on with some closing remarks from Magnus. I'll take over the screen.
So we only have one slide left. So thank you for attending, everyone, tonight. And if you have any further questions, we in the room will be here for at least half an more hour. And then we have food and drinks over there. And there's some swags over there as well. If you want to get in touch with us, with helping you get introduced more into LaunchDarkly, you have the contacts of Fredrik and Mihai and Bas down to the right there. And what we can do, we can, meet you guys with your companies and give you some more details about how you could work with LaunchDarkly and how Solidify and LaunchDarkly can help you together. We can take your organization to the next level with modern DevOps and platform engineering. And thank you guys for a great presentation. And thank you, Adam, as well. Any final questions? Otherwise, we'll go to the drinks. Thanks for showing up.